Yeah, g'day YouTubers, Tinker O'Toole again here with another video. Today we're just going to talk about setting up these guide rails so that they're nice, dead and level. As you can see, it's got 0.3 on it, and if I put it over here, it'll say 0.1, put it back over here, 0.3, 0.2. Okay, so it's out a little bit. That little bit that it's out, a fraction of a degree will do nothing. But these two guide rails, if we zoom in, can be out a lot more, because if you were to take the two bolts at the back, this whole guide and this clamping mechanism off here, so if you take the clamp off, you'll pull the actual vise, which will be three pieces. You'll have washers at either end, the backing plate and the front plate. If you look closely, you'll see that it's ground. So what they've done is assembled it and they've ground it. And it's actually quite dead level. But if you install different washers for different size gauges, then you can find out that this plate on the outside can move up and down a little bit, depends on where you hold it when you screw it up. So my good advice is to those that if you do decide to change it, put a square on the outside like that and line up the plate. There's not a lot of room. There's virtually no room here, except if you're at the back. If you actually look at the back, there's not much room here to put a square. You'd have to take this screw out and sit it right on the edge there. Alternatively, you could sit it on top of the rails like that and just try and give it your best guess. For this reason and this reason alone, I tend not to change the washers. There's instructions in the manual to go from, it's got 1.1 to 1.3 gauge, and they're talking about using a little shim, as I'd mentioned in one of my other videos. And there's a bit of information there about what you should do. Then there's more information here if you're using 1.5 to 1.6 millimeter, remove the shim, change the washers. So here they're using one washer, here they're using another washer. And then if we turn over the page, they talk about using a 2 millimeter, they must be harvester type chains or something. So 2 millimeter drive gauge, using different washers. What I found out is that when I got my Stihl USG grinder, maybe it was set up for 043 gauge, because as soon as I put 063 gauge in there, it was a little bit difficult to push it through. So I found two washers that sort of gave me about 1.8 millimeters in width. So I put them in there. Then I got the square and I set it up level. I actually used the digital gauge and I set it up level, and I still checked it with a square. So I like to do it both. Because I set this gap here at about 1.9 millimeters, this clamping mechanism really does work good on even on 043 gauge. You don't have to change the shims or anything else. I don't know why they've gone to that. Yeah, you don't do it on an Oregon grinder, so I don't know why they're trying to do that on here. And then if you keep undoing these screws and changing the washers, you'll have to re-level it again, because if the chain is sitting in the vise and one side's lower by 0.5 millimeter, the chain will be lopsided. And that's like having a downward tilt on one side. So you want these two edges, the back plate and the front plate of the guide rails, to be dead level. And that's why when you look on top, you'll see that what they've done is assembled it and put it on a belt sander and got it dead level, or they've ground it with something. You can see the grind marks on it, so it's been linished with something. And it's dead level. So by you undoing it, it's going to make it unlevel, because these are just screws. And anytime you drill a hole and put a screw in there, you've got up to 0.5 millimeter play. So this can go up and down a little bit and it can throw it out of whack. So I tend to set it up once, and look, it really works good on 043 gauge. No problem whatsoever. The only reason they're telling you to put the shim in there is because they're saying that it may not line up with the centre of the shaft of the grinder, because that's another maintenance procedure when the wheel wears down, and it will, you pull this down into the grinding position. All right, so you pull that down like that into the grinding position. You put a straight edge in there. Now, if you do use a Stihl ruler, make sure it's dead straight, because if it's a little bit bent, you'll get an incorrect reading. So it's got to be dead straight, so make sure of that. You take this cover off, and you'll see the shaft, and by having the ruler sitting dead straight, it should line up to the centre. So by them putting the 043 shim in there, that's just assuming that if the vise is sitting on 0 when the wheel's brand new, and you put a straight edge in there and you put the shim in there, that means that it will be centralised perfectly. If you're using 063 gauge, then they're telling you pull the shim out and everything will be fine. Now, if you've got a half a dozen chains to sharpen up, I don't think you're going to be taking these screws out, swapping shims. That's just ridiculous. You don't do that on the Oregon type grinders or any other grinder for that matter. So to me, I put in 1.9mm washers, and as I says, this tightens up and I don't need no shim over the back. If you're out by 5 thou from the centre line, 5 thou will do absolutely nothing as far as downward tilt is concerned. So I wouldn't even worry about that. They seem to be focused on that, but one of the other things, and this is a well-known fact, this mark on the back here is out by 2.7 degrees. So if I was to put this head on 0, this will be sitting, the motor will be sitting crooked. I'll actually do it for you. And this is a problem that Stihl know about, but for some silly reason, they won't rectify it. Now, it's been like this for a long, long time, and I'm talking more than 12 years. So what I did was just put another little mark on it. So we'll just zoom in there a little bit, and we'll just sort of get this set up a little bit better. So I'm going to set this, these are just little things that you need to know about. So there's the original 0 mark. Okay, that's the original 0 mark. Now there's the original 0 mark down the bottom. And as you can see, I've made one, and I've put a little bit of black texture on it. It's almost close to 3 degrees rather than 2.7. So the one down the bottom's the original, and the one up's the top that I put. Now apparently Stihl know about this, but they don't do anything about it. And I've got a friend that's had a Stihl USG grinder for 12 years, and his is out by the same amount. So yeah, not good. So what I did is use my digital angle gauge, set it on the flat base and zeroed it. And even if you to put it on here, it's pretty accurate. And even if you to sit it on top of the motor box, it's 0.5 degrees, and even if I was to sit it on the bottom, 0.3. And that's what you'd expect to get. Look, when you use one of these digital angle gauges, 0.3 of a degree. Who cares about 0.3 of a degree? I certainly don't worry about 0.3 of a degree, so it's sitting on 0.1 there. So it depends where you put it. Sometimes you get a little bit more of an error than other times. You put it up there against there, it'll say, depends where you put it, it'll read something different. So if we're to sit it up there, have a look at that, 0.1 of a degree. So depends where you put it. Probably the most important part is, yeah, sitting on the wheel, 0.1. Just got to make sure that when you use one of these gauges that it's sitting on the surface correctly. There's a little bit of a paper gasket on there, so you got to make sure that you don't sit it on the paper gasket, because anything can throw it out. So a little bit of mucking around just to make sure you get it right. But as I said, the reason why it's critical to have this at 0 and 2.7 degree error to me is really bad, is because if you look at the hedging type implements, the blades are spaced at 10 degrees slope either side. So the hedge cutters, they look like a bit of a up and down teeth like that there, and they're sloped at 10 degrees left and right. So therefore, you've got to adjust the head angle of this by 10 degrees. Now, you imagine that it's already leaning 2.7 degrees to the left. So it's already out by 2.7 degrees, and you're going to go over 10 degrees. So you're going to go over 12.7. And when you go do the other side, you're going to tilt it the other way, and you're not going to go 10 degrees. You take 2.7 off, and you're only 7.3 degrees. And that's why the Stihl USG grinder goes to, if you could zoom in there, that's the reason why it goes to, if you actually have a look, it goes to minus, we have a look under here, we go to minus 15, because on the actual shears they go to minus 10. Now, the Stihl dealers all know about this, still know about this, and for some silly reason it's got me baffled as to why they don't fix it. It's not rocket science. It really, everything else on the grind is spot on, but to be 2.7 degrees out, that's really bad. So it's the same as here, that if you don't watch what you're doing, you can be up to a 1.5 degrees tilted to one side. So in other words, if the outside plate is dropped down, your tooth is going to tilt over a little bit. All as I'm trying to tell you, if you do change these washers in here, that's okay, that's fine. Just make sure that when you line the plates up, that they're both sitting at the same height, that the front plate is not dropped down or dropped too high. There's quite a bit of movement in there, because it's not certainly a machined finish. They drill a hole, they put a screw in there, and there's tolerances on both, especially on a drill. A drill never drills dead accurate sizes, so, and a screw thread in a hole can be quite sloppy, and that's what it is on here. So it's not the perfect setup, and that's why this is made. You got three pieces. You got the back plate, the washers, the front plate, and the two screws to hold it. It is one assembly. They take the assembly, they put it on a linishing grinder, they get it perfectly square on the top. The moment that you start undoing it and playing with washers and put it back, it's liable to be out of square. I'm just trying to tell you how to put it back into square with a square, and then everything's fine, and your chain will sit in there, not lopsided. But especially this one here, just remember that it's 2.7 degrees out. And if you want to check your own grinder, put it on 0 and do the test. And the test is simple. I get the camera dead straight. That is sitting dead level. And if I was to put it on the original mark, so if I was to adjust this on the original mark that Stihl had, which would be a little bit more. Right. That's the original mark. I can see looking through on the camera. If you drop the camera down, look at that. That's your 2.7 degrees crooked. And then if you line this up, you'll see, look how level. If you hold this, you'll see how level the vise is on the bottom of the camera. And then you tilt forwards, you can see how crooked it is. And if you go back, you can see that that's tilting up in the air. You can see that there, if there was level, it's tilting down. How on earth does that get past Stihl Qualities control is beyond me. Now, I'll just show you something for those that maybe don't believe me. We'll bring this down and have a look at there. I'll see if we can zoom in there and get the original. There's the mark. So there's the original mark there. There's my mark. My mark's more like 3 degrees rather than 2.7. The bottom of my mark's probably 2.7. So to show, that's the original mark on the bottom. And as I said, if you stand back here and you come back and you put that back in, what looks crooked, people? Does that motor look straight? Does that grinding wheel look straight? Have a look at the grinding wheel. Now the other thing is, if you don't have any equipment to check it, there's a very, very simple way of doing it. And that is that you put a square I just can't. I'm going to have to, I'll just do this. Take this out for a minute. Now this way, we'll zoom in. You see the square touching the wheel? There's your 2.7 degrees. Look at your gap. There's your gap, people. So that's sitting dead square. So if you want to get a little square like that and check yours, sit your grinding wheel. Now I'll sit this on the mark that I made because I've got another mark over here. That's roughly close enough. And we'll check that again. That should be pretty dead level. Doesn't get much better than that, does it? Look at that. And that's what I couldn't understand. Now you see the motor looks straight. So it's not a major problem for chainsaw chain, but it's certainly a big problem for hedge trimmers, blades that only require an angle of 10 degrees. Now, because you've got that perfectly sitting dead horizontal at 0 degrees, if you go 10 degrees to the left or 10 degrees to the right, you'll be able to do your hedge trimmer blades and they'll be perfect. Anyway, I hope those little tips help. If there's anything else, someone was asking me about the washers in here, so hopefully I've explained all that. I just wanted to throw this one in because I think this one's important as well. If there's anything else that anyone's interested in on this type of grinder, feel free. Only one of the other brilliant features that I really do like on this is, and we'll zoom in there before I go, I really do like the feature where when you're adjusting the left and the right and this moves across. On the Oregon type grinder, you always have to adjust that backstop when you're going from left to right when the teeth wear down. So this is a brilliant idea. It takes half a second to move it from one side to the other. So yes, Stihl can come up with some brilliant ideas. The other thing that was my idea, that I've got this little clamping mechanism here that I just move this backwards and forwards and just lock it in a position. I've got one on the bottom of the vise, little clamp underneath here, just undo the clamp, slide the vise backwards and forwards, then lock it in a position. And then I made one over the side, which is, we'll just sort of get this is this clamping mechanism here, quick release, it moves, lock it in a position and it won't move. So if there's anything else, the only other thing that I did do, which works really good, is, let's see whether you can see it. I only use 30. This here is at 30 degrees. This is at 35 and the bottom mark is at 40. Because it's a lot easier, I can see from the right hand side, and I don't know why they didn't have their markings on that side. I just put my head around here and I can put it on. I know I created this so it's 30, 35, 40. rather than come all the way around here and tilt your head down. So I just find it a lot easier that you've got more vision on this side of the grinder. So they could have quite easily had that on that side. I don't know why they didn't. Most of the time the grinder is in that position. Very, very few times would it ever be in that position. And even if it was in that position, it's zero. That's zero position there, where the two black dots are.